power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech podcast feed.
Woo, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the Golden Stallion, here to bring you something that I've been planning to bring really since 2021 and going into 2022 now. Again, as I've mentioned in the past, in the recent past, that there were, as we switched over to Anchor.fm from Podbean, there were a few episodes that Anchor couldn't, get automatically transferred over. And so I've had to put them in manually into the feed, and you are going to get the remainder of those. So you're going to have a lot of SOVRYN Rewinds in the feed, and most of them I won't be putting in any kind of like custom or exclusive, as I like to call it, exclusive intro or new intro, new commentary at the beginning of it, perhaps updating on things. But as I've re-released the Sovryn Tech specials that didn't get brought over, I have been doing that because a lot of those specials were meant to be evergreen and kind of stand the test of time. And some of them very much have. Others, perhaps not as well. And the Sovryn Tech special I am bringing you about privatized space is just such a special that perhaps has not held up as well as some of the others. Like the Bitcoin one, I think still stands up pretty well. The one about dolphins being a sapient species, I think actually holds up very well. And some of the others do also. But this is one, well, you got to understand, this was recorded in 2013 using a lot of the latest news at the time, which there was a lot, especially around conversations of going to Mars by, everyday people effectively. And as you listen to this, I think you'll soon realize, wow, a lot of these things being talked about didn't happen. And they were supposed to happen either by now or very soon. For example, there was a group that planned on going to Mars, and that launch was supposed to happen in 2023. That's not happening. Now, let me be abundantly clear. That's not happening because of COVID. The COOF. That's not happening because it's not happening, right? And you just get a bunch of people who, I don't know, whatever, they just blow smoke, well, in orifices, and we'll leave it at that. But instead of out of the back of tailpipes, sadly. But yeah, you're going to realize when you listen to this, and I think it's actually a great opportunity to do so, of like how many dreams there were at the time of, nabbing asteroids and mining from them and creating training centers on them and all this other stuff. Again, all things that were supposed to fucking happen did not happen. And this has very much been the purview, it seems, or very much been the track record of much of the space race, which I talk about more, towards the end of the episode. And you can't help but feel, and it was certainly something over the years, over the, real almost 10 years since this was originally recorded, that I have, felt. And it was just really a feeling that just kept looming and getting greater and greater, over the years, that, a lot of the news around going to outer space just got less and less exciting. And not only, this is what was really looming, not only the lack of excitement, but more that a lot of these announcements from NASA and other organizations were really just marketing, and might even be, granted NASA's a quote unquote government organization, put that in quotes, but might have to do with investment dollars, in contracts and grants and all of this other stuff, and really has nothing to do with any actual forward momentum in getting humanity to the stars. And I've been feeling that for a good long while now. Now, it's not like there isn't actually things being developed, new technologies, and, other news coming out of space. I mean, at the time, I don't think anybody would have guessed that in 2022, the main factor of the space race or of getting humanity into outer space that we'd be talking about would be Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin. I don't think anybody would have expected that back then. Also, at the time, other than me, nobody was expecting Amazon to be the juggernaut in the tech world and the world in general that it is. Regardless, this is something you can listen to as a snapshot of, space news in 2013. You will hear me, again, this is Brian Sovryn from 2013 talking throughout that episode. You will hear me say things that probably come off as very strange compared to the Brian Sovryn you're used to over the past few years, and I mean, we're talking actually in many ways, not even long after I had recorded this. You're going to hear me defend some interesting concepts around property that I don't, really subscribe to anymore. That'll probably come off as strange. You're going to hear me say things like I support transhumanism, which most people know, and I've held for a very long time, that, for myself anyway, I don't support transhumanism. If other people want to engage in, whatever they define transhumanism as, go for it. Okay. I'm certainly, in the pro-choice camp as far as that goes. But, in fact, Ellen said this once in her brilliance, that I am actually pro-transhumanism. Just my definition or the transhumanism I'm going for does not include, cyborg parts, right? It is about evolving beyond humanity, but it's a biological transhumanism, not a technological necessarily, or, an electronic or cyborg, or again, we'll just use the term technological, transhumanism. That's not what I'm about. And at the time that this was recorded, I assure you that's exactly how I felt about the matter. And that's exactly what I meant. And in fact, I even would go on to say that I believed in 2013, in this episode you're about to hear, that I didn't think I would ever die. So, take that for what you will. If you are a Sovryn Tech patron, some of these comments might be clues to subjects that we have been deep diving on varying Wednesday Q&As and on the live Q&As that we've been having over the past few months. So you can see the hints of what I was talking about, or what I'm talking about now, even back then in 2013, that I might have wanted to express more openly, but, got to get them out in this way. One of the kind of famous Sovryn Tech axioms that I don't believe I had said at this point, but I was certainly suggesting it, but, I would have said it not long after, is, nothing is certain, not even death and taxes. And I still stand by that statement. And this is an episode that certainly points, at that. But anyway, I don't need to spend a ton of time here talking about this, only that it's interesting to see how much did not happen, again, in what should have happened. As far as my excitement around, humans going to outer space, that excitement on a personal level, on an individualistic level, is actually still there. In fact, it's not only still there for me now, even though I said looming lack of excitement over news announcements, but that's more around the news and what other organizations are doing. Where's the Dragon 2? Where is that SpaceX? That's going to look alien. Anyway, you'll hear me talk about that and then you're going to be like, yeah, where is that, Elon? Oh, another thing that you actually can't produce because you're a freaking liar. But anyway, pardon me. Yeah, that was a bad one. But really, my excitement for humans going to outer space, in many senses, is at an all-time high. But it's at an all-time high that has nothing to do with Blue Origin, NASA, SpaceX, the Russians, go down the list. And what do I mean by that? Well, that's something that we've been talking about a lot on Patreon. So if you want to hear about that more, go ahead and sign up for that, patreon.com/SovrynTech. And there are conversations that will eventually get into Sovryn Tech proper, but it could be a while before we get there. But, you want the inside track, Patreon's the place to get it. Anyway, so, this is interesting, I think, to go back to and to listen to. Again, I have no faith in any of the companies that I talked about. I have no hope in that they're going to get us much of anywhere. Certainly, I'll spend a lot of time in this episode talking about going to Mars. I don't see that happening anytime soon, and I sure as fuck don't want Elon to be the one going there. I mean, who knows what the hell that would look like. But, I mean, also at the same time, I'm not going to stop him, but, I'm not excited for it in any way. I mean, even other things that come after this episode, like Asgardia, the first space nation. I haven't heard a peep out of that long before, any kind of conflict in Ukraine. I haven't heard a peep out of that for probably at least a year or two. And you could say it's because of COVID, but then this is, the funny thing is the COOF, okay, that whole pandemic just proves the point of why we need to get to outer space, right? Like, what's better than a vaccine? Living on a whole other planet, and what? All the projects are like tanking and taking a back seat when this happens. No, if anything, this should cause people to ramp up. And that did not happen. That has not happened. So again, I have no confidence and I have no excitement. Just I'm not interested in a lot, in what a lot of these other organizations are doing. I'm interested by some of the technologies getting developed outside of Blue Origin and SpaceX, but yeah, the big names, that's not where it's happening, folks. That's the bottom line. So anyway, please enjoy this snapshot in the space race, as it were, either the race for us to get to other planets, or however you want to consider the space race. Enjoy this again from 2013. So also be kind to my presentation style. It was a little softer back in the day, but anyway, I hope you'll enjoy it, and more Sovryn Rewinds to come. I will let the episode itself ride out, and I will see all of you on the other side.
Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready, because here it comes. Tired of boring specials about history, science, and technology? Then get on your best headphones, because you might want to lay down for this. A Sovryn Tech special with the world's foremost anarchist technophile, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge, well, And now, here's Brian.
Here I am, Brian Sovryn, the Golden Stallion of the tech world, here for another great special. That's right, and this is a special actually that I've been touting for a little while. And I was waiting, I have to admit, full disclosure, I was waiting on some certain information to kind of come out, okay? And it's finally come out, the information being from a couple companies, but it's finally come out, it's finally all confirmed and whatever. And so now I'm comfortable talking about some of this stuff, but this is really, really exciting. This is the Privatized Space Special, again. And this is all about, what is this? What is privatized space? What are we talking about here? And what this is, we're talking about the future of space exploration, for one. And for two, we're discussing how government just isn't going to be a part of it. Okay? At least not if we play our cards right. And I want to open this up. I mean, this is just such a fascinating topic, because a lot of times, I'm a participant of the Free State Project, full disclosure. The Free State Project is essentially a plan to, its only mission statement is that, government, the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. And it's a plan to get some odd 20,000 people to move to New Hampshire within a certain time frame And when they do, they can start getting freer, making freer choices in their life. They can do like maybe political action or civil disobedience or whatever kind of actions, their media, whatever they kind of do. And media certainly is one area where New Hampshire's really owning it. I mean, the amount of libertarian or anarchist or, pick your word, your voluntarist, whatever, media that comes out of New Hampshire is insane. No one touches it. No, the amount of liberty-oriented content that comes out of there, that's the best way to say it, that comes out of New Hampshire is just, it's mind-boggling, and nobody even comes close. Nobody comes close. I don't care where they are. So anyway, see, you have the Free State Project, which the idea is, to get freedom in your, liberty in our lifetime, to get free on earth, etc. And I think that's great, and I'm participating. I'm a participant of it. I'm an early mover. I moved within the first 1,000 people. I think I was number 966, if I remember correctly. They have a little ticker on the website that tells you, what, like when you moved, like what number mover you are. So anyway, that was the one when I changed my address to Keene, New Hampshire, that it came up with 966. So I'm guessing that's me. Anyway. And I'm all for that, but I gotta say, where we're really gonna find freedom, and where we're ever gonna find any true, genuine freedom, like anything close to that, that utopia or quote unquote anarchist society, it's gonna be in outer space, in my opinion. And speaking of liberty in our lifetime, I really do. I think we're going to have private space travel in our lifetime. Of course, also, I am a huge supporter of transhumanism, and so I think that our lifetimes are going to, match the orders of Methuselah, who lived 900 some odd years old. If we don't just end up living forever, which is fine with me too. I have absolutely zero intention of ever dying, and I've said that for a long time, kind of like the AC/DC song, Back in Black. Isn't that fitting? Forget the hearse because I'll never die. And I personally, I believe that. Anyway, so space is the future, so let's talk about space. Here we go. We got the Sovryn Tech Privatized Space Special ready to rock and roll. And we're going to open up with a word from our government. Or should I say, we're going to open up with a word from NASA. And this story is coming from The Verge. Again, all this stuff will be linked to in the show notes that I'm talking about, and you can look at it there. It won't be as organized as an average show is, because there's just so much information here, but there will be a complete list of all the articles that I'm reading from in the show notes, and you can go to soundcloud.com/Sovryn Tech, or you can go to sovryntech.com, or you can go to the Google Plus page, or even the Facebook page. First, I guess people still use Facebook, so I have a page there. Anyway, this story goes from The Verge. NASA chief rules out manned moon mission in the foreseeable future. Okay, so NASA Administrator Charles Bolden has dismissed the idea that the space agency will attempt another manned moon mission. Speaking with contemporaries, Bolden said, NASA will not take the lead on a human lunar mission, possibly in my lifetime. Bolden added that if the next administration reverses NASA's decision, it would set back the manned space program in its entirety. He warned that should we divert resources toward a manned moon mission in the future, we would probably never see Americans on the moon, on Mars, near an asteroid, or anywhere in our lifetimes, explaining that we cannot continue to change the course of human exploration. Very depressing. The agency will instead focus on a manned research mission to a nearby asteroid, as it announced 3 weeks ago. That's not to say that we won't see another human on the moon. There are multiple companies, not governments, planning commercial space flights, and Golden Spike last December committed to take people to the moon by 2020. Bolden's statements echo the words of President Obama, who, while making a speech at the John F. Kennedy Space Center, acknowledged there was a desire among some to return to the moon before exploring the further reaches of space. And Obama in quotes here, "I just have to say, pretty bluntly here, we've been there before," said Obama back in 2010. "There's a lot more to space to explore, and a lot more to learn when we do." Clearly, he knows a whole ton about space exploration. The guy can't even manage a checkbook. But anyway, that's besides the point. So here we go. NASA's saying, guess what? We're And this is actually rather true. NASA is essentially saying, we're out of the space business, guys. We're out of this whole like astronaut thing. We don't really do that much. Now, yes, they do still send people up to the International Space Station, etc. But actually now SpaceX, which is a privatized space company that won the SpaceX Challenge, actually, they have their Dragon capsule, which that's going up to the International Space Station now. So you already have privatized, literal private spaceships, not government spaceships, that are going up there and doing this. Anyway, so this is what NASA has to say, and now I think it's interesting to move on to a Canadian actual newspaper called the Globe and Mail, and this is written by Ivan Semenuk. So a guy named Ivan might know a thing or two about space. Anyway, we'll just read right into it. The O'Neillians are coming. In the 1970s, fed up with government bureaucracy, the Princeton University physicist and space advocate Gerard K. O'Neill became convinced that free enterprise was the key to extending humanity's presence beyond the Earth. Now, as a flurry of newly formed companies unveil plans to mine the moon and asteroids, and a non-profit foundation seeks to launch humans to Mars, Dr. O'Neill's entrepreneurial vision, not government, entrepreneurial vision, as well as a big dose of Silicon Valley wealth, looms large behind it all. It's the expansion of the economic sphere outward to where the resources are, said Bob Richards, co-founder and CEO of Moon Express, a Bay Area company that seeks to place the first privately financed lander on the moon. Mr. Richards left Canada in 2009, discouraged by a lack of momentum in a space industry reliant on government contracts, but still dreaming about the Apollo moon landings that inspired his interest in space. After spending time among California's venture capitalists, he realized he had arrived at the right place at the right time. I found the tribe that can do this, and I never left, said Mr. Richards, who spoke in Toronto on Thursday at a conference on commercial space development. Prominent among Mr. Richards' tribe are some of the region's high-tech billionaires, enthusiastic fans of space exploration whose financial clout is like a blast of oxygen to the flickering torch of the post-Apollo generation. Mr. Richards, who launched Moon Express in 2010, counts former Microsoft executive Naveen Jain among his partners. Nice. Another recently formed company, Planetary Resources of Seattle, which seeks to extract the mineral wealth of near-Earth asteroids, is backed in part by Eric Schmidt Jr. and Larry Page of Google. Google also has, they have like a Moon X Prize, like there was the Space X Prize. They also have like the Moon X Prize, who's the first one to land something on the moon. So all these companies, they really are putting their money where their mouth is, which is more than the government can say because the government doesn't actually have any money, at least not anything real. Industry watchers say the trend was already evident a few years ago with the capital that wealthy investors like Virgin Group chairman Richard Branson and Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos poured into ventures looking to ferry tourists into low Earth orbit. But the real watershed moment may have come last May when PayPal founder Elon Musk, who heads the aerospace company SpaceX, saw his Dragon capsule become the first private spacecraft to dock with the International Space Station. These guys get it, said Rick Tumlinson of Deep Space Industries, a Houston-based company that in January unveiled its own plans to develop asteroids commercially. The difference between SpaceX and the latest round of ventures is that while flights to low Earth orbit are supported by a U.S. administration that is looking to private contractors to step into the gap created by the retirement of the space shuttles, the business case for commercial activity in deep space has yet to be put to the test. This is why the backing of the tech titans, who made a profitable industry out of the internet, has become crucial to the next wave of space development. These are the people who can walk the walk from a business perspective, Mr. Tumlinson said, adding, "We are selling a vision, but unless we can support it with a viable business case, no one is going to work with us." There's no shortage of skeptics who point to the high cost of missions to the moon and asteroids, which so far have been mounted only by government space agencies, and cast doubt on a profitable return. Mr. Richards and others count that a revolution in space technology, some of it developed for military purposes and now working its way into the commercial sphere, has changed the equation. Once jump-started by an initial boost of private funding, they say a fledgling space resource economy will become self-sustaining. If so, scientists are among those
who could stand to gain by hitching low-cost rides for their instruments on the wave of survey craft and moon landers that is expected to start fanning out to distant targets over the next decade. The main benefit will be cheaper and more frequent access to space, said Sarah Seeger, an astrophysicist at MIT, who also advises Planetary Resources, the company, as to whether the industry has reached a turning point on the road to an O'Neillian future. We'll have to see, Professor Seeger said. But if there's a will, there's a way, and if there is brain power and capital. And it would, of course, seem that there's plenty of capital available, according to this article, and the brain power is unmatched, probably in the history of, at least known history. So it's there. And just real quick, a quick overview this article has of private, publicized private plans, private ventures to operate beyond Earth's orbit. August 2010. Moon Express announces plans to launch a series of robotic lunar missions focused on opening up the resources of the moon for the benefit of humanity. April 2012, Planetary Resources, another company, announces plans to mine asteroids, bringing the natural resources of space within humanity's economic sphere of influence. Then also December 2012, Golden Spike announces its objective of achieving affordable, reliable, and frequent human expeditions to the moon. January 2013, Deep Space Industries, DSI, announces it is building a team with the skills to turn raw asteroids into valuable products. I'm very excited about Deep Space Industries myself. February 2013, this is just, a month ago, or, a little over a month ago, U.S. multimillionaire Dennis Tito, the first space tourist, unveils a non-profit foundation to send a married couple on a return trip to Mars. Now, so there we go. We've got at least 5 big plans of people, putting their money where their mouth is, or at least saying, hey, no, we can do this and we're going to do it. You got 5 different companies, Moon Express, Planetary Resources, Golden Spike, Dennis Tito, whatever he has a non-profit anyway that's going to do it. And then, of course, Deep Space Industries. Now, you can look up on YouTube, a lot of these guys have, again, they're publicized plans. So they have these public, presentations, these videos that they've made, or even talks that they've had where they're discussing what exactly their plans are. And the interesting thing, the first thing that's going to step out at you when you watch these videos, and I recommend it, especially the one from Deep Space Industries, is really, really good. Part of the reason being, now Deep Space Industries is talking about going out, way out into the what they call the main asteroid belt. That's literally its name, is the main asteroid belt. Not like MAINE, but MAIN, which is to be compared with like the Kuiper belt, which is, where Pluto is, around there, outside of there. And they're planning on doing business there and, mining these like the asteroid Ceres and, and all these other asteroids, for various minerals, materials, elements, all the good stuff. And the great thing that they do, how they're selling this, okay, yes, you're going to make a lot of money. But one of the ways that Deep Space Industries in particular sells their pitch is that you can have the good life. You can have it all. And all right. So you get that? And that's what all these companies are doing. They're saying, no, look, we can make this, eventually I know it's expensive now, but we'll make it a little affordable later. But they're all saying the same thing. We can have it all. There's abundance. We can do it, and you can live that life. You can live the good life, whatever that may mean to you. And I think that is fantastic. And the stark contrast is that when the government wants to go do something, why are we going to do it? Well, because it's there. That's from a John F. Kennedy speech, very famous, when he's like, why are we going to the moon? He's like, because it is that, when the guy went to go climb Mount Everest, he asked, why did he climb? He's like, because it was there. Now, while all of that is relatively impressive, I guess, it's impressive speech, it doesn't really say a whole lot. No, why are we going there? And there's just not, yes, as humans, we naturally want to explore, sure. But there's not that grand reason. And what reason can government give? Is government going to say, yeah, we're going to do that. That way we can supply, more materials for you and we can do all this stuff for you and everything. And no, they don't say that at all. In fact, they turn it into pretty much a game of football where it's like, okay, we got to make the touchdown first before the Russians do. And that's what the space race is all about. Not about humans being better off. The space race is about dick measuring, quite frankly. Or, well, actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the show. A lot of the reasons that NASA gives for going into space are nonsense, and they have well documented reasons as to why, and it's nothing that they told the American people. Anyway, but do you see my point here? Is that here it is in microcosm, a picture of what it's like doing things on planet Earth. Why does a private business do it? So that they can make money. And the only way they can make money is by turning a profit to you. Okay? Is by giving you a good, or you a service, or you an abundance of some kind, to where it makes them money. It's entrepreneurship, plain and simple. Okay? Why does government go? I don't know. They just take your money. They don't even ask you for it to see if you have any worth out of it. They just take it. And they say, yeah, well, we're going to go to space. We need to launch this. We want to do this. We want to do that. Now we read the article from the chief of NASA who said, look, we're not sending a man. We're not doing it. We're just not doing a manned mission to the moon. We're just not. Why? Because the budget, we'll read an article about this, but NASA has no budget. Almost none. NASA has turned into a weather station. They've turned into a weather program. Okay, maybe they're using Hubble to look at stars way out there, but they're not doing the big stuff anymore. And now they admit it. Now the chief of NASA, that article was from a week ago in April of 2013. And they said, yeah, we can't change the course of history anymore. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with me, Brian Sovryn, the man who always wears triple black. Sovryn Tech is a show about science and technology and how it can set you free. Remember, Sovryn Tech only endorses businesses and products that we genuinely believe in and support ourselves. If you have a product or website that you would like to have reviewed, you can email the show at sovryntech@hush.ai. Please keep in mind that the reviews on Sovryn Tech pull no punches. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Sovryn Tech. This is Brian Sovryn with you, of course, the Rembrandt of the podcast canvas, here with the Privatized Space Special of Sovryn Tech. An episode that I had been promising for quite a while, and now we can finally do it, and we're going to finally get it out there. So we ended off the last segment with the fact that NASA doesn't have a budget. And so, is this true? Well, let's back this up. This article comes from IO9, and the article is, most Americans predict humans on Mars by 2033 are utterly deluded about NASA's budget. Okay, what does that mean? The article continues, in the wake of the wildly successful landing of NASA's Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity rover on August 6, 2012, it may come as no surprise that the American public are currently feeling rather enthusiastic about exploring Mars. The sentiment has now been bolstered by a recent poll carried out for the nonprofit corporation Explore Mars by the global communications company Phillips & Company. After surveying over 1,000 people, 71% of the participants said they feel confident the U.S. will land a human on Mars within the next 2 decades, so by 2033. On average, the same sample said they believe the U.S. government spends 2.4%, with a standard deviation of 1.68% of the federal budget on NASA after they were told the agency currently has 2 operational rovers on the Martian surface. This, sadly, is woefully over-optimistic. The current allocation for NASA is a skinflint 0.5%, that's $17.7 billion, of the 2013 federal budget. By comparison, the average federal budget allocated to NASA during the Apollo program in the 1960s and early 70s represented 2.8%, a whole over 2 percent points. Okay? Needless to say, when informed that NASA gets such a small slice of the federal pie, 75% of the respondents said they strongly agree or agree that it is worthwhile to increase NASA's percentage of the federal budget to 1% to fund a mission to Mars. Despite difficult economic times, the American people are still inspired by space exploration and are committed to human exploration of Mars, said Chris Carberry, Executive Director of Explore Mars. This is a wake-up call to our leaders that Americans are still explorers. On top of the respondents' to-do list on Mars was to first achieve a greater understanding of the red planet, followed by search for extraterrestrial life in the red soil. Another priority was to maintain U.S. leadership in commercial, scientific, and national defense applications. Despite the politics, NASA keeps surprising the world by what they can do with the tight budget they've been allocated. But landing a 1-ton rover on Mars, although mind-blowing, costs a lot less than mounting a human expedition. So if the 71% want to see a NASA-led human mission, they'll have to start bugging the representatives to support an increase in the space agency's budget. Otherwise, it's down to the commercial space sector to spearhead mankind's next great interplanetary adventure. And of course, that's what we were just talking about, is that, these governments can't do it. So, it's a funny thing. So many Americans want to go do this. I wonder why they haven't thought, gee, maybe if we could just stop fighting all these wars on planet Earth, we could give more money to NASA. Now, let me make my position clear as an anarchist, that I don't want I don't want there to be governments. So NASA, is kind of an anathema to me. And admittedly, though, that was like the last program. That was like the last piece of government that I was like proud of. I'm like, well, we did have NASA. But you know what I mean? I would rather, if I have to pay into the system, you know what I mean? If my money's going to get stolen from me through taxation, if I have to pay into the system, I'd much rather go to NASA and send people to Mars than to send people to their death. I'm shocked that Americans weren't like, yeah, you know what? Can't we just do that? In fact, if you want to solve the problem with terrorists, just get up into space. They're supposedly also backwater. They're really not. They're supposedly also backwater. They couldn't follow you. So let's just take the whole country up there. So I'm intrigued. I think there was some fudging of the numbers, or fudging of the attitude of these people, that somehow they're really excited about space exploration, because I wasn't alive in the 60s when the Apollo missions were going on. But I don't sense that fervor anymore for people that want to do space exploration. I don't feel that it's there. It's unfortunate that it isn't, because again, I think it's the real future. But at least the fervor, like we discussed in the last segment, at least the fervor seems to be alive and well in these privatized companies. And speaking of one of them, Planetary Resources, they actually reported that, now here's something NASA does want to do, is they want to bag an asteroid. So this is NASA's solution. No, we won't go to Mars, we won't go to the moon, but we'll do this. Word is leaking out, this is according to the article, about NASA's plans to catch an asteroid with a robotic spacecraft and tow it back toward Earth, where it would then be placed in a stable orbit around the moon. There, it can be a nearby destination for NASA's human exploration program and serve as an initial facility to help the development of asteroid mining technology. As U.S. Senator Bill Nelson noted, the plan combines the science of mining an asteroid along with developing ways to deflect one, along with providing a place to develop ways we can go to Mars. With the plans, while the plan sounds out of far left field, it's based upon a recent study led by the Keck Institute for Space Studies. The study sought to find ways to retrieve an entire small asteroid within reach of NASA's heritage technology. I participated in this study along with Planetary Resources Advisor. It is very exciting that NASA is considering this bold step. Now, wait a second. Which one are they doing? Because you're saying, no, there won't be any manned missions. We're not doing any of this stuff in our lifetime. But then they're planning this, that they want to capture an asteroid, and essentially it sounds like they want to use it almost as kind of a training ground. and put it around orbit of the moon. Now, at least that's smarter than they're putting it around the orbit of the moon instead of the orbit of Earth. But this is kind of weird, and this isn't cheap. I don't have the article up right now, but there were people reporting on this saying, wait a minute, you can't afford to just send people up there, but you can afford to pull this off? Interesting also is that, I wonder how this article here doesn't discuss it, but they're saying now, the European Space Agency is saying that Phobos around Mars was put there artificially, just like they're talking about doing this with the moon. Interesting. We'll be back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you ready?
I've never seen anyone so treated like a god in my life.
Brian Sovryn as guest co-host tomorrow night, and so that should be a good show.
On that note,
we just added Brian Sovryn.
Okay, we haven't.
Oh, is he good?
He's been in the audience.
He's certainly got opinions on things. Yes.
I'm so close to being like God. No one is above me. Okay, absolutely no one. I don't take orders from anybody, and I mean that's how much closer to God can you get?
Is there anything he doesn't do better than everyone else?
Oh, that's just his way of talking. He's one of the best.
Break it down!
Catch Sovryn Tech, the show about technology and how it can set you free with me, Brian Sovryn. That's SOVRYN at SoundCloud.com/Sovryn Tech.
Think you can tell me what to do?
We are back with more Sovryn Tech. It is I, Brian Sovryn, with you, and we are talking space travel, the private way. We left off the last segment with talking about how we mentioned Mars. So let's go to Mars, and we'll talk about one of the projects that we discussed in the very first segment of the show, which was Dennis Tito, and this article is from space.com, a great website. If you've never gone to space.com, check them out. It's just a top-notch news site as far as anything space-related goes. And the article goes, Dennis Tito's 2018 Human Mars Flyby Mission Explained. And there's a nice infographic here that you'll be able to look at. It shows kind of the spacecraft they're using. Interestingly enough, the spacecraft they're using looks a lot like the Constellation spacecraft that NASA was designing before they scrapped any kind of like real human space travel type things. It was supposed to be the replacement for the space shuttle program, which was retired a couple of years ago. And so interestingly, this looks like that, which the Constellation program, the vehicles that they made for that, also interestingly looked exactly like the vehicles from the Apollo missions in the 1960s. Because government's really good at innovating. Anyway, so you'll be able to find this in the show notes and look at the, take a look at the infographic. And I think they're pretty much just using a Dragon capsule, which SpaceX designed, and that's fine. I mean, SpaceX is just picking up the pieces. You know what I mean? And they're doing, the fastest proven way really to get into space. I think they're trying to build a reputation. And so even while, the spacecraft looks like something very, very old, it did work. You know what I mean? It did work. But obviously we're not thinking forward, but we will talk about where SpaceX is thinking forward with their Dragon 2 in a little bit here. Practical schemes for sending humans to Mars have been on the drawing boards for more than 60 years. Originally planned by it says it here. Pioneering space engineer Wernher von Braun, author of the 1952 book Project Mars, proposed Mars flyby flights using Apollo lunar spacecraft in the 1960s. In 2013, Dennis Tito's Inspiration Mars Foundation, that's his nonprofit, announced plans to launch a spacecraft on a mission to fly past Mars without landing in 2018. So no one's landing with this mission. They're just going to do a little flyby. Okay? While a decision on the flight vehicle has not yet been made, and the SpaceX Dragon capsule has yet to carry a crew as of early 2013, here is a look at how the mission would work. And of course, it shows you the photos here. For Mars flight, the capsule would have to be modified to support 2 astronauts for the 501-day round trip. 501 days. An inflatable habitation module could be docked to the front of Dragon for additional living space and for carrying more supplies. Now, this is a very popular idea because in space, you don't have gravity, so you could essentially like stick out giant balloons, or at least, you don't have the gravity of Earth, I should say. So you have these giant balloons that can like stick out of things, and they create, very, very, dense material that they can make it out of, but they can just blow it up, and then you have, all this room to kind of like live in. Now, obviously, it's not something if you're going at exceptionally high speeds, perhaps closer to the speed of light, if we ever achieve that, which we may talk about, you wouldn't want to be inside something that's inflatable, but it's there, and it could make for a very enjoyable time. And the crew of 2 would, so the crew of 2 would probably consist of a middle-aged married couple, which is what we talked about earlier. The danger of radiation damage during the flight would suggest that a man and a woman who are past reproductive age would be preferable. The Dragon capsule would be lofted into space by the Falcon Heavy booster. The 2018 launch window represents a rare opportunity for a fast trip of only 501 days. Obviously, that's close to 2 years. The flight path is of the gravity assist type, where the spacecraft falls along its course without the need for major rocket engine firings. 1956, Italian astronomer Gaetano Crocco wrote a paper detailing how a spaceship could coast all the way around Mars and back to Earth without using rockets along the way. This trajectory is called a free return and was also used by the Apollo astronauts to reach the moon. So essentially, they would use the gravitic pull of a planetoid, in this case Mars, and it would slingshot them around. It would whip them around and send them on their way back to Earth. And as there's nothing to stop their inertia, they would just keep going, and they wouldn't actually need fuel to do it. They just go endlessly. Mariner 10 was the first unmanned probe to use a gravity assist technique to visit Venus and Mercury in the early 1970s. The plan for the Inspiration Mars flight calls for the spacecraft to first fall inward toward the sun to be accelerated by the sun's gravity. Then the craft is hurled outward, passing Earth's orbit to intercept Mars near the height of its trajectory. So, that's a ride. Anyway, we'll be back with Ray Moore. We'll talk more about Mars in just a moment. This is Brian Sovryn.
Launch. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched.
Get us out of here. Return fire. Freeze them. Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5. Welcome back to Sovryn Tech, here with your privatized space special. It is I, Brian Sovryn, the apex of own sauce, and we're talking Mars right now. We've been kind of going all across the board, what NASA isn't doing, what privatized companies are doing instead, and right now we're on Mars. So we talked in the last segment about how, someone could do like a flyby of Mars, through a slingshot process of, whipping a craft around. So let's talk a little bit more. What are the other plans for Mars? And this article's from VentureBeat. It's by the beautiful Jolie Odell, really. And Mars One announces university partnership to put humans on Mars permanently. Now, Mars One, it's a website you can check out. I'll put it in the show notes. Mars One is a kind of a think tank to get people onto Mars. And here we go with the article. Mars One, a commercial space mission intended to put humans in a permanent Martian colony by 2023, has just announced its first science and education partner, University of Twente, a Dutch institution with an entrepreneurial edge. I find that I find this incredibly ironic that the Dutch would would be behind some serious exploration once again. If you know any of your 17th or 18th century history, you'll get that irony. Anyway, the mission sounds like a crazy one at the outset, without the support of any governmental space agency, sending human beings to a faraway planet with no plans to ever bring them back to Earth. But founder Bas Langstroop remains undeterred, following through on his dream with practical financial plans and the million baby steps between an idea and a launch. Mars One started recruiting civilian astronauts early this year. The company got its first funding a month later and followed that up with its first federally approved contract for developing materials and equipment for the mission. That just led into a key as to part of the problems with a lot of these. Anyway, today's baby step brings in the organization's intellectual partner for the mission. University of Twente will put its scientific research and educational weight behind the startup and its goals, helping Mars One to develop survival techniques for life on an alien world. So they're thinking, okay, what do we need? What do we need? You know, I don't know if they're going to pull off, like I remember Carl Sagan often talked about, like having black, like genetically engineered plants on Mars that were actually black so that they would collect more sunlight. And so, you know, whether they're planning on things like that, I don't know, but interesting stuff. Anyway, for starters, Mars One employees will be contributing to a new engineering college within the university called the Atlas College. The program will launch this September and will encourage engineering students to focus on breadth of study to solve big societal global problems. The university's robotics and mechatronics departments, in turn, will be making contributions to Mars One's robotic vehicles, and behavioral scientists will be working with the mission's astronaut recruits on coping mechanisms for high-risk, low-certainty living situations. Okay, so it's a scary thing is what they're saying. And we've got to look at the psychology, okay? You know, we don't want you to freak out. There's going to be points to something no one's ever done before, and we need you to kind of keep your cool. So that's what they're talking about. Okay, the article continues. The Mars One mission shows a lot of courage and ambition, and the team clearly dares to think big, said University of Twente Rector Magnificus and Professor Ed Brinksman an emailed statement on the partnership. As an entrepreneurial university, their enterprising spirit appeals to us a great deal. We hope that from the complexity of an expedition to Mars, new research projects will sprout as spin-offs in the fields of solar energy and recycling solutions for problems we now face on Earth. Interesting points. In fact, like there's a lot of people who say that, you know, one of the nice things if we actually were settled on Mars is that we could do all this like industry, you know, all this big industry that produces all these pollutants and causes a global warming, because you'd actually want it to happen on Mars. As where on Earth, you know, theoretically it's killing everything. On Mars, you actually want that to occur. So, you know, so Mars is appealing to a lot of people with these these kind of underlying thoughts, I think, that these articles aren't necessarily mentioning, but they're out there. But that's why we're doing a Sovryn Tech special on it. One last thing on Mars, and this is kind of the information. This article is literally from like today, today being April 9th. And this is kind of the information that I was looking for. And it's from Mashable. Is Mars for sale? Wow, by Amanda Mills. Early explorers risked their lives to reach the ends of the world, but not purely for the advancement of mankind. In reality, this is the article, in reality, their bravery was motivated by one very powerful prospect, the possibility of wealth, be it treasure or land. Today, Mars is our land beyond the horizon, a territory that can only be reached by plunging off the edge of our flat, incomplete map. But just like setting sail to the unknown west, sending a human to Mars is enormously expensive, not to mention dangerous, perhaps even deadly. But even with the clear risks, people are sinking millions into private Mars colonization projects. Will they eventually pull a King Ferdinand and claim Martian land as their own? One treaty that holds the cards. There aren't really any laws that have been tested and widely adopted with respect to extraterrestrial land ownership or even ownership of the stuff that we bring back, says Andrew Rush, a space lawyer who regularly works with emerging aerospace companies. Rush says the most applicable piece of law we have regarding real estate outside of Earth is the Outer Space Treaty, which was served as the basic framework for international space law since 1967. More specific, Article 2 of the treaty addresses claiming ownership of extraterrestrial property. Outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty by means of use or occupation by any other means. However, Rush tells Mashable, any attorney could poke holes in the Outer Space Treaty because there are a lot of loose ends. It all comes down to vague phrasing, starting with the term celestial bodies, which isn't defined. The question is, what is a celestial body? Is it a tiny asteroid? Does it include Mars? That's an open question, says Rush. The second phrase that stands out is national appropriation. To understand why, you must first put the Outer Space Treaty into context. It was written and signed before man ever went to the moon. The main reason for its creation stemmed from fear that the United States would plant a flag on the moon and claim ownership. The treaty was an effort to avoid fighting over territory. When considering both the literature and the time surrounding the formation of this treaty, it's pretty clear that they weren't trying to exclude private ownership, Rush says. It was addressed towards government bodies. However, Base Landstrup, head of private Mars colonization venture Mars One we were just talking about, disagrees with Rush's translation of Article 2. As far as we know, which is confirmed by our experts, it is not possible to claim ownership of Mars land. Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty forbids appropriation, he tells Mashable via email. What goes for governments also goes for individuals in those governments. Although Landstrup intends to send humans on a one-way mission to Mars in 10 years, he says that doesn't mean he will own the land. After all, colonization implies populating, cultivating, and sharing a territory. To illustrate his point, Landstrup points to Dennis Hope, an entrepreneur who claimed ownership of the moon, then in 2009 maintained he had sold more than 2.5 million one-acre lunar plots for about $22 each. Hope said the Outer Space Treaty, which is quarterbacked by the United Nations, did not apply to him because he was an individual, not a country. We're going to finish up this article in just a moment. We'll be back with more Sovryn Tech.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
It is time for more Sovryn Tech. Here we go. Let's get right back into the article from Mashable. We were talking about this amazing story about Dennis Hope, who said he owned the moon, and he was selling off, 1-acre plots for $22 a pop. So anyway, Hope, who leads the Lunar Embassy Corporation, then went on to establish his own galactic government. See, he said, look, this treaty, the Outer Space Treaty that we were talking about earlier, he said, it doesn't apply to me. The Outer Space Treaty just applies to governments, not to individuals. And there's some argument over that. Anyway, so he starts his own galactic government, complete with a constitution, Congress, and its own currency. He fought to receive official recognition and argued that because the galactic government was not part of the UN, any agreements regarding the moon were irrelevant. So far, he hasn't been successful, so he's still trying to get his galactic government off the ground. The position of the galactic government is that we're not trying to distance ourselves from other governments. We just want recognition so we can work together, Hope told National Geographic in 2009. When it comes to the moon, another piece of law called the 1979 Moon Treaty creates much more red tape for lunar entrepreneurship. The stringent treaty explicitly excludes national and personal ownership of the moon, but there's a catch. Only 17 countries have signed. Five have ratified it, and none of those are spacefaring nations. It's like a landlocked territory dictating how a coastal territory uses its port, says Rush. But we were here first. It isn't, that's a byline. It isn't entirely fair to equate future Mars explorers with Hope, who has never been in orbit, let alone set foot on the moon. If Hope had poured money into a successful trip to the lunar surface, he may have had a better case. In theory, that same notion applies to private Mars colonization projects. However, Tanja Masan-Zwan, Deputy Director of International Institute of Air and Space Law and one of Mars One's legal experts, says the law won't bend even for someone who does complete a successful Mars mission. Landing there does not change anything. States cannot appropriate, neither can their citizens, she tells Mashable via email. It would be too easy to say my government cannot use a nuclear weapon, but I as a citizen am not bound by any treaty provision that my government accepted, so I am free to do as I like. This argument simply does not fly. Now, obviously that's ridiculous. There's a real problem with that, but we'll go on. If all goes according to plan for Landsdorp and his Mars One venture, a group of at least 30 humans will settle on Mars in 2023. The colony will expand every few years as another group arrives to spend the rest of its participants' lives on the Red Planet. And as that settlement grows, more and more Martian land will be used. As Earth's own colonization history has proved, placement and subsequent expansion of a settlement has essentially led to ownership of that land. But Landsdorp disagrees. It is allowed to use land, just not say that you own it, he says. It is also allowed to use resources that you need for your mission. Don't forget that a lot of these rules were made long ago when a human mission to Mars was not within reach. Now, that's an inaccurate statement because Wernher von Braun clearly was planning on a Mars landing, and that was in 1952 with his book Project Mars, which was made long before these laws were ever made. So Landsdorp is dead wrong as far as that goes. Even if you could find a solid rod of gold or a big diamond, it would cost more to ship it to Earth than you would make selling it, he says, maybe at this point in time. Mars One operates as a non-profit entity, and the money raised will be used to fund its $6 billion mission. However, Landsdorp says if Mars One can sift through the regulations of sending materials from Mars to Earth, he may be interested in bringing home Martian rocks for research, but also for our business case. Imagine how many people would be interested in a grain of sand from the New World, he says. In that case, Landsdorp, who maintains that Mars One will not work with federal agencies in order to avoid politics, says he'll make those materials available, but not for free. Any research institute, including NASA, would be able to purchase parts of what we bring back to Earth, he says. Okay, so here's people being very confused because, like, this is the whole idea, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, of there's some anarchists who believe in the idea of personal property and private property, and that private property is stuff that you can pick up and carry with you. Personal property is like land, and that there's somehow a difference between the two, that you can't own land. Of course you can own land. Of course you can own Mars. Is Mars technically for sale? I think so. And I think this leads me to think, this article, and the lawyer Rush on this did a great job of laying out the big questions that no one had asked up until now. This is all new stuff that the governments don't have any restriction of this stuff. Anyway, we'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. This is Brian Sovryn.
Are you searching for a mouth-watering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find George's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, George's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for George's famous baklava.
Welcome back to Sovryn Tech. It is I, Brian Sovryn, with you. And we are talking space, privatized space. Yeehaw. Some of the things we didn't mention, because we're going to go past Mars now, but some of the things we didn't mention is there's talk about people doing space hotels. There's talk of, there's Virgin Galactic by Richard Branson that's going to, they have like Spaceship Two, which is going to put you on a somewhat of an orbital flight, not really in orbit, but it's going to allow you to essentially go into space, for a price tag of, $25,000 or something along those lines. And so we're not really mentioning those. I'm going a lot bigger. I want to go a lot deeper I mean, I think a lot of these orbital things that people are talking about doing are absolutely going to come into fruition, because a lot of these companies that are planning on doing like these hotels and things of that nature are getting all the government contracts that they need to do it. Some of the things we've talked about, like what's going on with Mars, are starting to get some degree of government contracts, but it's not all happening. Anyway, let's go past Mars, and let's just past Mars actually, and let's go to the main asteroid belt that is just beyond Mars. And this is Deep Space Industries, and they're saying that an asteroid in a particular asteroid called 2012 DA14 is worth $195 billion. Okay. Obviously, that sounds very exciting. This comes from the Digital Journal. The article goes, prospective asteroid miners Deep Space Industries say asteroid 2012 DA14, set to brush past Earth on Friday, may be worth $195 billion. This is an asteroid that went by back in February. And an official of the company said the asteroid may harbor $65 billion of recoverable water and $130 billion in metals. Digital Journal reports that 2012 DA14 will brush past Earth on Friday at a distance. So that's the one that came really close. Everybody was talking about it back in February 2013. Let's see. Space.com reports that Deep Space Industries, however, admitted that the estimate of $65 billion of recoverable water and $130 billion in metals is just an optimistic guess because 2012 DA14's composition has not been ascertained. Besides, its estimated size is based only on the rock's brightness. Deep Space's optimistic guess has been disputed, which is true. There's been some companies that have come out and say, no, it's not worth $195 billion. But Deep Space Industries' point is that the potential is there for it to be worth that much and that it isn't uncommon. Okay? And so they're looking into, getting into these asteroids, say ones that come nearby. Maybe they're the ones that would be working with NASA to possibly, because NASA wants to bring in that asteroid that circles around the moon for a little while. And do their business with that. Let's see. We'll go on with the article. Digital Journal reports that Deep Space Industries says it wants to use asteroid resources to help humanity establish a firmer foothold to conquer new frontiers in space. According to Digital Journal, the company plans to pioneer efforts to build robotic spacecraft that can mine precious metals from asteroids. The company announced recently its plan to launch a fleet of prospecting spacecraft in 2015, just a couple of years away. We're in 2013 right now. And begin harvesting metals and water from near-Earth asteroids by 2025. And then, of course, their major plan is, again, to go beyond and even, hit up the main asteroid field. Space.com reports that the goal of asteroid mining ventures is to reduce the amount of material that space missions need to source and launch from the Earth. The website reports it costs at least $10 billion to launch 1 ton of material into orbit. Tomlinson said, getting these supplies to serve communication satellites and coming crewed missions to Mars from in-space sources like asteroids is key if we are going to explore and settle space. According to Digital Journal, Deep Space Industries says it plans to build a set of spacecraft known as Firefly, that's funny, that will fly missions in search of asteroids that may be mined. The Firefly fleet will be followed by a fleet of spacecraft called Dragonfly that will bring asteroid samples back to Earth for assessment in the search for mining targets. The company also plans to extract ice water from asteroids that will be used to produce hydrogen and oxygen for use in rocket fuel. The company hopes to establish space gas stations, quote-unquote, where spacecraft on deep space voyage may stop to refuel. Okay, awesome. Absolutely awesome. So no humans involved. They're just going to launch up some robotic spacecraft that can communicate, and they're going to find, these asteroids that can, figure it out. And with any luck, these probes essentially that they're going to send out, this, fleet of robotic ships will be able to kind of refuel themselves maybe naturally. I mean, and they're planning on starting launching these things in 2 years. This is happening. Okay, this is really, as long as the funding's there, this is really going to be happening. Obviously, like I said earlier, the government, or like this article even claimed, the government was downplaying. They had all their scientists come out and say, oh, no, it's not worth that much. Don't get so excited about this. If people didn't think it was worth that much, DSI, Deep Space Industries, would not be getting so much funding as they are. They're none of this would be coming into fruition. Do you understand what I'm saying? If people thought that it was just that wacky. We're not talking about, this isn't some like religious case where a guy comes through and says, yeah, look, this spaceship's going to fly by, and if you kill yourself right at that moment, you'll live forever. No cost to you. No, it's nothing crazy like that. You have to get the kind of money that it takes to do these projects. You've got to deliver a real business plan to real people with real money. Okay, so these guys aren't crazy in what they're pulling off. They're not crazy. Now, real quick, so we talked about DSI. Something else I want to bring up is we were talking about, okay, what kind of, when humans get up there, what kind of craft are we going to use? They talked about using the Dragon, SpaceX's Dragon capsule. And I kind of knocked on it and said, well, that's like 60 years old, or not 60. Yeah, well, almost 60 years old, I guess. But that's like 50 years old. It's old tech. The government never really innovated outside of the space shuttle, which may not have been their original design in the first place. That's an interesting thing. And so, when are we going to start looking forward? I mean, that's like the whole thing, right? Is that government doesn't innovate, but somehow private corporations do. So why aren't the private corporations innovative? Well, first off, SpaceX did innovate with their ability to even get into space. But second off, is that they have the Dragon 2 coming out. And there's a lot of little designs out there. I'll share a link in the show notes. There's a lot of designs that are being tossed around out there. And they said, and pretty much the head of SpaceX said, this thing's going to look like an alien spaceship. They said, believe me, we're innovating. We're going to make something that you've just never seen before. And now, is it going to be too different? Because, there are, kind of the laws of aerodynamics, or not the laws, but there's good aerodynamics and there's bad aerodynamics. So, I don't know how weird it's going to end up looking, but there's some designs out there and it's very, very intriguing. Okay. So they are planning on updating, how we get up there, the ships that get used. And this, again, this is happening. We've got, asteroid mining that's essentially going to start, or at least begin its search in 2015. They're going to be hoping to have gas, interstellar gas stations, quote unquote, set up by 2025. And if the government would just keep its regulations out of the way, first off, all this probably would have already happened, because it's not like we just suddenly have a ton of billionaires. We've had quite a few billionaires for some time, and all these things could have already been happening. And as to what exactly suddenly, is it because the government just doesn't have the money anymore to do it, that they're loosening up the regulations and allowing other companies to do it now? I don't know. But there's something weird, even weirder than that brings me pause. And we're going to talk about it in just a moment on Sovryn Tech. I'll be right back.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovryn Tech producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's porctherapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
Here we are with more Sovryn Tech, and we are on our privatized space special, as you know, and now we're going to get into, we talked about what these guys, what all these private companies plan on doing, Deep Space Industries, Mars One, Elon Musk has plans for Mars, and now here's the part that may not have been, readily apparent in how I presented it. A lot of these plans, except for a couple, there's a couple that were like in 2010 and in 2012, but all these plans suddenly started to get funded and suddenly started to get taken seriously and get press. Started to get talked about in the news. In like February of 2013, just like kind of out of nowhere, in this 2-week span, suddenly they got, this was just before like March. Suddenly there was all this talk, Elon Musk is going to go there. We're going to send a married couple there. The Dennis Tito's going to do, Deep Space Industries, they released their presentation, which, again, beautifully stated, you can have it all. You can have the good life, everything, all this stuff, so there was just like this boom of privatized space plans that go beyond orbit of the Earth. Again, there's a lot of things I think that are going to happen very, very soon. No question about it. Around the orbit of the Earth. I mean, there's stuff that happens around, with like satellites going up and all this. Scotland even just sent up their first satellite the other day. A lot of this stuff is going on, around the orbit of the Earth, and that's not a big deal. But I'm talking about going like to the moon and beyond. And so a funny thing happens. Suddenly all this press gets out there again that all these people are going to do it. It seems like people are apparently excited about the idea of going to Mars or of going to the moon again. I mean, the reason the head of NASA just yesterday, or it would have been April 8th, 2013, made a statement that, look, we're not going to the moon, does seem to imply that people were like, okay, yeah, can we go to the moon now? Let's go do this. So there's this excitement. And what happened, why, like I said before, there's people that wanted to do this before, and there was a lot of excitement before. And in fact, some people even argue, like with Wernher von Braun, he had like a 3-stage rocket that could have made it to Mars. There's some people that argue that, haven't we sort of had all this technology all along? And there's some credence to that because, like we said, what Dennis Tito wants to do, where he's sending possibly a SpaceX Dragon, which again is essentially a slightly modernized Apollo capsule from the 1960s. They're going to send that up, and whip it around. It's going to do its whole thing. We're 1960s technology. Why didn't the government do this before? Why did the government go to space in the first place? Now, I mean, maybe that's a question for another time. Part of the reason that I think that, the government, especially the United States government, was so interested, well, the United States and the USSR were so interested in getting into space in the 40s and 50s was surveillance. And there's plenty of documentation for this, that they wanted to be able to, they wanted spy satellites. That's like the whole purpose of NASA. If you look into it, there's a thing called the Secret Space Program. It sounds far more conspiratorial than it is. Okay, because it's actually totally legitimate. It's not made by Alex Jones. It's called the Secret Space Program, and it just lays out and it shows you. It says, no, look, all they cared about was getting spy satellites into the sky. That's it. Both governments, the USSR and the United States. So, but that can't be all of the reason. I mean, we don't need a spy satellite on the moon. So why did they go to the moon? Did they actually go to the moon? An interesting point on that, there seems to be two camps of people as far as like going on the moon goes. And I guess we're going to start diving into some conspiracy theory territory here, because the article, the kind of the final article I want to bring up is a bit of a conspiracy. I find to be a bit of a conspiracy theory. But with the moon, and maybe I'll do a special on the moon in the future. I don't know. There's people who think that it never happened, that the whole thing was staged, and Stanley Kubrick, he did it all. And there's a movie called The Shining Code 2.0 where apparently, you can find it on YouTube, where apparently Stanley Kubrick says, yeah, or, he's artistically saying, I faked the moon landing. And that we never actually went there, and we had to fake it because that way we'd beat the Russians to the punch, and they wouldn't even try, whatever. And then there's the people who think, no, we went there and that was pretty amazing that somehow we pulled that off, and good job, hooray, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. I'm actually kind of in a third camp. Okay. Now, I mean, people don't just say that they faked it because of Stanley Kubrick, in the movie The Shining. They say it because they feel they have like a lot of photographic proof, like the photographs from the moon. There's all kinds of problems where like the light's not shining right, or the flag's doing something funny, or there's no tracks behind one of the rovers. All this different evidence, and there's a bunch more. Then there was an episode of Mythbusters where apparently they relatively prove that yes, we did go to the moon. Not that I needed Mythbusters to tell me we went to the moon. I do believe we went to the moon. However, I'm kind of in a third camp on the whole moon thing. This is kind of a sidetrack, but I think that there are discrepancies in the photos. And I think those discrepancies are there because they're hiding something. They being, I guess, the United States government. Is it alien technology? No, I'm not making that claim at all. For the record, I've said this before on Sovryn Tech, and I'll say it again. I do not believe, unless it was like on Mars thousands of years ago, which new articles have come out that say Mars at one point did support life. There are no aliens in this solar system. Maybe on Europa, but you get my point. Nobody's traveling from outside the solar system into ours. It's not happening. Okay. Faster than light travel doesn't happen. And if they're pulling off generational starships just to look at humans, then those aliens are, quite frankly, pathetic. Generational starships is the idea that, okay, yeah, we know it's going to take 100 years. So what we'll do is you'll have kids on the way there, and you'll teach those kids how to use all the equipment and everything. And then those kids will carry on the mission for you after the first generation that left the original alien planet die. That's a generational starship. And like I said, if aliens were pulling that off just to study something, I mean, maybe they have a greater, they're more willing to give up their life for a waste. Because if I looked at the Earth and I looked at humans, there'd be some of them that I'm proud of. There's others that I'd be like, wow, you guys, what are you guys doing? Anyway, so I'm kind of that third camp that they are hiding something on the moon. And there's some truth to that and some proof to it. In the late 2000s, India discovered, using some of their space programs, some of their stuff, they discovered that there was water on the moon. And they made this big announcement. I think it was 2007. They made this huge announcement that, we found water. This is very exciting. Let's get to the moon. Let's do this. And NASA comes out and says, we already knew that. And the whole world goes, what do you mean you already knew that? Why did India waste millions of dollars? They didn't waste, but in this case, it would have been wasting if we already knew there was water. Why did they waste millions of dollars to find out that there's water on the moon? If we already knew that. It's because NASA didn't tell anybody. And they showed the documentation. They said, no, look, we've got it right here. We knew in the 60s that there's water on the moon. Big whoop. So my point in telling that story is that, yeah, NASA does keep stuff quiet as far as what they found on the moon. Who knows what else they've kept quiet. Again, I'm not saying it's aliens. Please, I'm not that kind of guy. So anyway, speaking of a little bit of NASA cover-up, okay, this is kind of the last article I want to bring up here. And then we'll talk about privatized space a little more. After all these stories came out, like I said, Elon Musk, Dennis Tito, Mars One, the D-Space Industries, all these guys suddenly say, yeah, we're doing it. We're going to get out of Earth orbit and we're going to start making stuff happen. Suddenly, NASA releases this story on March 1st. It says, NASA probe detects third radiation belt around Earth. And this is from the RT. Now, the radiation belt around the Earth, there's what they call Van Allen belts. We'll read the article. Maybe I'll describe it. Scientists assume that there are only 2 radiation rings around the Earth, but a recently launched NASA probe has detected a new temporary belt. As radiation rings pose serious hazards, the findings have implications for future manned flights. I'll repeat that. The finding has implications for future manned flights. The third belt of radioactive energy particles was detected by the 2 Van Allen probes shortly after they were launched into space in August last year and lasted for nearly a month. Okay, the Van Allen probes. So you have you have these two Van Allen belts, like these belts of radiation that kind of shoot out from the magnetic poles of the Earth. And now suddenly, on the cusp of, privatized space, really, on the cusp of all these people suddenly saying, here we go, we've got the technology, we're going to do it. Suddenly NASA says, yeah, see, there's this third one. There's this third Van Allen belt. And, you never know when it's going to be there and when it's not going to be there. So, and it'll kill you. So, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do this whole man thing, going into outer space. Or at least you better put it past us. You better clear it with us. I'll keep reading the article a little bit here. The third belt of radioactive energy particles was detected by two Van Allen probes shortly after they were launched into space in August last year. That would be 2012, and lasted for nearly a month. But the discovery may have been made more by chance than by intention. NASA activated the probes months earlier than expected to overlap another similar mission that was ending, and within a day noticed a third belt forming between the two well-known ones. We started wondering if there was something wrong with our instruments. We checked everything, but there was nothing wrong with them. The third belt persisted beautifully day after day, week after week for 4 weeks, said Sri Krenkel, the deputy mission scientist for the probes at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Van Allen belts were discovered back in 1958 by the first U.S. satellite Explorer 1 and named after the scientist who put Geiger counters on the space vessel in the hope of finding them. The Van Allen belts are pulled in by the Earth's gravity. The inner one is created by the collision of cosmic rays from outside our planetary system colliding with the Earth's atmosphere, while the outer one is created by solar wind, elements that are released by the sun. Understanding them is key, not just in theory, but for manned missions. The belts emit radiation that is dangerous to crew members and equipment and are subject to solar flares, sun eruptions from the energy from the sun, and geomagnetic storms. Astronauts have to be shielded in special suits while satellites and onboard devices get switched off when radiation gets too high. The third belt appeared between the two existing ones after a solar eruption blasted particles from the outer belt into a slot between the two belts at the end of August. Scientists had noticed particles in the area in the past, but never assumed they could be so numerous or structured. 4 weeks later, another blast from the sun destroyed the short-lived phenomenon. The sun giveth and the sun taketh away. So anyway, we have this third belt now. And, maybe they just never knew about it. And I am open to that. But it's just so strange that, all this talk, there seems to be like this excitement. People are doing, like Elon Musk did this huge presentation. Just a packed house where he was saying, yeah, we're going to go to Mars. We're going to do this. And then suddenly out of nowhere, like I said, NASA says, there's this other Van Allen belt. And boy, if that's going, your whole crew's dead. It's all over. And boy, that just seems fishy to me. It really does. That smacks so odd. Is the timing just coincidence? Maybe it is. Anyway, I found that I really did just find that to be so odd. And I'm not going, there's a lot of theories. There's actually, it's an interesting thing if you want to look it up on YouTube. It's called Alternative 3. And what this was, it was a show. There was a show I think in the 80s called Science Report. That it was a serious show. Just every week it was on BBC One or whatever, and it would, it documented what was going on around the world in science. It's kind of like Cosmos, obviously not as done with as much panache as Carl Sagan would do, but it was a serious documentary type show, and the show got canceled. And for their last episode aired on April 1st. And so they did what was apparently a joke. And the whole show, and a lot of people got fooled by this, because Science Report, again, the show was deadly serious. It wasn't a joke of a show. And the host was, an older guy, very, very, it's someone you'd look at as like an authority of some kind. And they laid out this whole thing about what they called a brain drain, where supposedly Russia and the United States, all the great scientists were disappearing, and all these like key people were just like going away. And, the host of Science Report said, yeah, we got this information from an anonymous tip, and we started looking into it, to do our due diligence. And now there's points in this where you see actors, okay, like people that you can find in other movies, particularly like American actors. So that kind of lends to the idea that it's fake in the first place. But what you find out, what the show claims, this special episode of this April 1st episode of Science Report called Alternative 3, you find out that Russia and the United States have colonized Mars. And they colonized Mars like in the 60s. And at the end of the episode, they actually they play like 10 seconds of footage from Mars. And some like weird thing happens there. Anyway, so, this idea that the government is like hiding a lot of space programs that they've done, and that's why privatized space has yet to take off, is not new. A lot of people have thought it up. A lot of people think about it. And part of the credibility to it is that the technology to do these things now is very, very old. Not all of it, but most of it. To achieve what these people are talking about doing, we've had. And in fact, Wernher von Braun, pretty much wrote it out. Project Mars from 1950, that's a great, great book. You can feel the datedness of it, but it's a phenomenal read if you ever want to look into that by Wernher von Braun. And so, and then you get an article like this where suddenly, oh yeah, we found out there's this deadly thing that's just going to kill you if you go past it. So maybe you guys should stay home, and leave all this up to the big boys. Or at least make sure you get our permission to do these things. It is, to me, it is very, very, very odd. But, let's talk about those government regulations, and now they've got a new one because they're like, well, you're going to have to go at this set time so they can make sure that you only pass through whenever that third Van Allen belt isn't there, if they end up actually letting any of these plans go through, with humans on them anyway, And you have to wonder, like, if there weren't all these regulations that people had to, you can't, this is my point. You can't just, you can't just build a spaceship. Say you had the money and you had the time and you put together your own spaceship somehow. Okay. The astronaut farmer, whatever. And you went to, you say, okay, well, now I'm going to go launch. I'll see you all later. You can't do that. You can't just launch into space. There's all these regulations now. People will say, well, it's for safety because what if that thing fails? What if it blows up? That much fuel. This is dangerous. You can't have people doing that. Look, if governments weren't here, insurance companies would probably be making sure that everything was covered, if you know what I mean. So who knows where technology would be as far as that goes. But, these regulations are just are destroying companies. Now, companies would make sure it's safe in the first place. If private companies were launching into space, they're not going to do something that's going to injure people, because then they're going to have like this huge lawsuit, or they're going to lose all the money they have because no right-thinking person would ever buy from them again. Do you see what I'm saying? They have to please human beings, so they're going to do, they're going to make sure it's done right. They're going to make sure it's safe, probably 10 times safer than any government plan would ever be. In fact, real quick, speaking of that, there was a news article just a couple months ago where they pretty much discovered that NASA knew that the Columbia tragedy, where quite a few astronauts died, this was about 10 years ago. Apparently now they're coming out and they admitted that NASA knew that Columbia wouldn't make it back, and they let those people die, and they didn't tell them. Pretty twisted stuff. That's kind of a sidetrack. But my point in saying that is that private companies, the government, why should they care? They're going to get your money no matter what. Private companies would not have such a luxury. And people say, well, private companies don't care about humans. They put toxins into the water. They put toxins into the water because they know the government's not going to get them. Do you see what I'm saying? That the government's going to back them up. When these companies crash, the government just bails them out usually. Okay, so don't blame the companies. There's a control structure that exists in the world known as governments, and that's what allows a lot of this nonsense and this endangering to occur. And again, it has no incentive. Government has no incentive to do things right or to do things safe. It really doesn't. It just doesn't. So you have to wonder where we'd be if private companies, could just go ahead and do it and not have to go through all these legal hoops on, getting stuff, making it look like this and going through this window and making sure that they don't tick the Russians off when they fly over and, all this stuff. I mean, who knows? We could already be in space hotels. We could already be on Mars. In fact, I'm fairly certain we would be. And just an interesting aside, now that things are kind of getting out of NASA's hands, it seems a little bit, and these private companies are still, apparently this third radiation belt hasn't set any of them off. They're doing it anyway. But, people still talk about how, but it's going to take such a long time to get there. Like we talked about with Dennis Tito's plan with the married couple where they would end up, it would take 501 days. Well, the good thing with that is that apparently they're now designing, and this is from April of 2013, but there's a fusion rocket that's being designed that would get people to Mars in 30 days. So let Deep Space Industries, work on the gas stations and all that stuff. And here we go. We can do it in 30 days now. How can you beat that? So this stuff is possible. And, now that science, this kind of science, like we've been talking about this whole episode, is getting funded by like billionaires in Silicon Valley, look how fast suddenly we're leaping in technology. Like the Dragon 2 from SpaceX. This one's not like the Dragon 1 looks, like I said, it looks like an Apollo spacecraft. It's very little difference. Okay. The Dragon 2 is going to look so alien, they're saying. You won't even, they're claiming you won't even recognize it. So now that real money's getting involved and people have to live up to that money because it can't just be taken by taxation, we're getting these insane advancements. Finally. And that is so exciting. It is awesome. In fact, with this, real quick with this, this fusion rocket that can do it in 30 days. They're saying the team's idea, this is out of a University of Washington team, the team's idea is to use a strong magnetic field to fuse a series of metal rings into a shell around a deuterium plasma. The shell compresses the plasma, creating a fusion reaction that lasts just 25 millionths of a second. The reaction heats the metal shell and blasts it out of the back of the rocket at 67,000 miles per hour, propelling the rocket. The team hopes that enough of these brief reactions, they can push a rocket along continually all the way to Mars. So it's not just going to keep firing. The engines aren't just going to keep firing. They're going to do like systematic, quick billionths of a second shots. You know what I mean? And that's going to get you there in 30 days. Incredible. So the technology is here. Okay. The technology is here to finally do all of this. The plans are devised. The ability's there. The desire is clearly there. That's why all these people are getting funding. And it's all set up. And in fact, again, this was the first article we talked about, where the O'Neillians are here, the guys that said, okay, look, government can't do this whole space thing. We've got to get private entrepreneurs involved. That was said in the 60s. What took so long? Government took so long. Government got in the way. And, if you want to get into conspiracy theories as to why the government got in the way, sometimes I don't blame people. especially when it comes to outer space. Like with these radiation belts, I mean, there's people who say that those radiation belts are so bad. That's one of their like provings. This is just with 2 of them, not with the third one that we were talking about in this segment. But some people say, that's why they actually didn't get to the moon, because they couldn't have, humans could not. There's just no way they could survive the Van Allen belts. I don't think that's accurate, but, who knows? Okay. And another thing with the moon landing, like, it's true that there is a certain point in the recording of the Apollo mission where they're filming Earth. Okay. They're not on the moon right now. They're on their way to the moon. And they're filming Earth, and there's a point where they do a zoom out trick on the camera inside the capsule. They're looking out a window inside the capsule. They do a zoom out trick, where it makes the Earth look smaller, and they act like they're further away from the moon than they are, or they're further away from Earth than they are. And they recorded as such, and it was played on TV. So they lied. There's one example of them lying. Does that mean they didn't go to the moon? No, that just means that they went for like some glory shots to make it look really good. Well, it was probably actually pretty harrowing. So when people, say they give you all these conspiracy theories about the whole space thing, sometimes I don't blame them. Because again, we have all the technology already. Why aren't we out there? And it's not like the money's there too. All the money's there to make this stuff happen. NASA's budget doesn't compare to what Bill Gates makes, to what, some of these other guys are making in the, thanks to the internet. And, if you can find ways to support these companies, please do so. But I think the real trick, and this is kind of the major point that I want to hit home here. The real trick to getting us into space is to put an end to the monopoly on force, is to put an end to governments, because they're the only thing that's holding humanity back from anything and everything. Now the case could be made that religion's a problem too. But even that's kind of like coming into the Catholic Church said in 2007, I believe it was, they said, there could be alien life. So now the church isn't even really in the way anymore. It's government, and it's got to go so that we can grow as a species, so that we can have the abundance that like DSI was talking about in that video. Check out that video. It's beautiful. Where they tell you can have the good life, you can have opulence, you can have it all. We don't have to be, resources don't have to be scarce. We can get to post-scarcity, and going into outer space is one of the ways that we can do that. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think I'm going to wrap it up. We got kind of into conspiracy territory. The whole point that I really wanted to make with this is that everything, all the chess pieces are in the right place to get humans off of the Earth and thriving in our solar system, and then in turn thriving on Earth as well because of the abundance that's out there. And again, that government is what's in the way. It's what's stopping everything from happening. Anyway, this has been Sovryn Tech. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't hesitate to look me up on Google+. Actually, I've been pushing Google+ quite a bit. I'll just make this quick. Google+ is growing. I mean, that is really, really growing. And so I'm making my presence, Sovryn Tech's presence there as big as I possibly can. And in fact, now, if you go to sovryntech.com, SOVRYN, of course, if you go to sovryntech.com, and if you find the G+ link on the right, you scroll down just a little bit, and on the right, there's the G+ link. That's actually going to take you to my personal page. And you can, circle me and interact. I post all day long on Google+. I love it. The amount of information that I find on there, so many of the articles that made up the special, I found on Google+. And it was so easy to find just because of the beautiful presentation. So you can get interactive with me personally there. I'm inviting you to please, I understand like there's, I don't want to be a creeper and click, circle you, and then you're like, oh, this person doesn't know me. And no, I'm saying, go ahead, come on and circle me. Okay. It's all right. And in fact, there's an easy URL. I'll tell it to you right now. You can type in gplus.to/Brian Sovryn. Okay. BrianSovryn. And that'll take you right to my page, and go ahead and circle me. Put me in your acquaintances, your friends, whatever. Okay. I post stuff all the time. There's also a Sovryn Tech page. You can go to same thing, gplus.to/Sovryn Tech, and that'll take you to the Sovryn Tech page. But I share all the stuff on the Sovryn Tech page. I share that on my page too, on my profile. So check that out. That's where a lot of this stuff's happening, and it's really, really exciting to see. And also, of course, you get not with the specials, but the regular episodes of Sovryn Tech, you get a day early on G Plus. Through the YouTube. You get the YouTube video. You get it a day early before it hits the feeds, before it's on LRN.FM, before it's on any radio, before it's on the SoundCloud page, before it's even on SovrynTech.com. You get it if you're on G Plus. So which I think is just very, very, very exciting. Anyway, that's it for me. It has been a pleasure doing this with you. Check out the articles, look at the evidence for yourself. Send me an email, sovryntech@hush.ai or at sovryntech.com. You can ask a question, and, let me know what you think. If you have answers to some of this stuff, or if you have maybe some debunkings, some of the conspiracies we talked about, talk to me, and I'll do it in a listener email section in a later show. Okay? And it'll be a great time. So again, thank you so much for joining me. This has been Brian Sovryn, and you've been listening to Sovryn Tech.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.tumblr.com. That's SOVRYN tech.tumblr.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.